of stone. Those buildings consist of, like the ones I'm leaning on to, like the more smooth ones, which are of a later stage, but in principle it's the same type of rock. And this is a type of a beach rock, which one finds along mostly the southern half of the Israeli coastline. It disappears into the waters of the Mediterranean and one proceeds further north. Here and there we have bits of remains in the matter of little beach rock islands, a mile or two off coast. It served to the ancient cities, to modern days, a major building material to put up ancient to modern towns. So quite obvious, Yafo from way back had built its homes on the little tight beach rock, which mostly consists of sand, which was mixed with other materials drawn down from the hills of Judea by riverbeds, erosion cycles, and created that type of beach rock along the seaside, of which people came down and cut and quarry their stones to put up houses. You see, that should be taken out of one's home for the 7 days of Pesach. So in a sense, to clean up the house, to clear up Yafo from the presence of Arabs who were causing so much trouble, the operation was called Operation Chametz. While
what a contrast, across the street and here. Everything is, I don't know, what do you want to see?
others partly blocked by the next door trees, and the highest for the time being is the Shalom Tower, which bears the name of Meir Shalom, or Shalom Meir, who was amongst the founders of Tel Aviv. Jaffa, which had a small Jewish community from the 20s and 30s of the past century, as Jews landed onto the shore of Palestine, some of them had settled into Yafo. Some of them were busy with the matter of the port and naval move from Europe to the Holy Land, so on and so forth. Few have opened hostels to welcome pilgrims, Jews and non-Jews, and the small community grew to be of a few thousands towards the end of the century in the 70s and early 80s. And in a sense, likewise, the Jerusalemites, who found no more space in the old city Jewish quarters and seek for pieces of land to purchase and to establish something new, so happened to part of the Jewish community of Yafo, who were moving out of the ancient walls, and walls in Yafo we actually have no longer, on a do bits, and purchased next door is a little piece of land, and erected two Jewish neighborhoods attached to Yafo. Nobody yet spoke about a new city. And those were Neve Tzedek and Neve Shalom, really at the outskirts of Yafo, next to the mosque I have pointed out as we drove by along the seaside. So those were two Jewish communities still considered a part of Yafo. Moving into the 20th century, another group of Jews who lived in the older sections of Yafo decided that it's about time to create a new town, a new village, new proper Jewish Hebrew-speaking enterprise next to old Yafo. And they seeked and went out another mile or two and found a barren land of sands and dunes and decided this plot we are going to buy to establish our new community. They appealed to Jewish National Fund to get loans with which they could be able to purchase that little piece of land. And there were 66 or 67 members, families, joining into that project called for a number of years Ahuzat Bayit. The official foundation of Tel Aviv is the year 1909. Just at the eve of the First World War in 1914, when already the number of people grew and they saw to the beginning of expenditure around the arrangement of the first 67 families, they decided to alterate the name and they called it Tel Aviv. The name Tel Aviv appears once in the biblical text in the book of the prophet Ezekiel. Yet when it appears, it has nothing to do with a location. It is a term which is used by the prophet when he prophesies in the Babylonian exile to the Jews who were down there, way back. He uses the term Tel Aviv to determine something actually linking between the past and the future, the ancient and the new. And that was depicted by the committee of Ahuzabait to serve now the new name of Growing Tel Aviv, to emphasize the linkage between the past, as they have left old Jaffa and went to modernize themselves, their style of life, into the new city. The term Tel refers to an ancient site, to an archaeological place upon which we are. We are at the top of the Tel of Yaakov. In some of the excavations we are going to see soon downstairs. And Aviv in Hebrew means spring. And spring is renewal, is blossom, is everything green again, and the flowers are coming out after the winter cold season. So the new vis-a-vis the old Tel Aviv, the name on the term, or the term was depicted to now determine the new growing city. And I said Hebrew because they did insist that the kids will speak Hebrew and study in Hebrew, though obviously most of the people conversed in Hebrew. Yet, if one thinks of the 19th century, it appeals to Jews who came as immigrants from various parts of the Jewish diaspora, and first and above all, used to carry on conversing in their languages, whether it's the languages of the countries they came from, or what was considered to be the proper common Jewish language. For the Spanish Jews, as we call them, the Sephardic Jews, it was Ladino. That was a common language known to many Jews all over places at which we had Sephardic communities. The Ashkenazic Jews coming in from Central to Eastern Europe used to speak Yiddish. So obviously those were the spoken languages, day-to-day life speaking for those Jews. Just at the eve of the First World War, there bursted out a big dispute with the more modern Jews, those who partly broke away from orthodoxy, from the old-type Jewish fellow who lived here, and they said, now we should go and speak our ancient language, Hebrew. And the Hebrew, in a sense, was revived to serve a spoken language. Everybody knew to pray in Hebrew, everybody could read a chapter of the Bible, or a Mishnah text in Hebrew, but I'm saying it was not that much considered a spoken language day-to-day's life. In 1912, 1913, there was a big dispute, and especially to bring it into the schooling system. So the young generation should be brought up in Hebrew. And where we see the Shalom Tower today, stood the Hebrew School of Tel Aviv, named after Herzl, Herzliya Gymnasium, Gymnasia Herzliya, which taught its kids in Hebrew only. I'm saying that school building disappeared the moment this plot was allocated to raise up this Shalom Meir Tower as a business center. And this top hill gives us the linkage between Tel Aviv, the modern, the new, and Jaffa, Yaakov the old. On to, I will say, the war of 1948, Tel Aviv managed to expand quite a lot. It served the center of the Zionist movement in Palestine because the Zionist movement, in a sense, opposed the old-type, very Orthodox Jews who one saw and still sees in Jerusalem. And Tel Aviv, from the beginning, was considered modern, so the offices and all the operations came out of Tel Aviv, and therefore no wonder, as I have mentioned on the bus, that the declaration of independence of the State of Israel was drawn and declared here in Tel Aviv. Yet, the moment the War of Independence was over, unanimously, this council, which was still serving a temporary one because we did not have yet elections, had taken the decision to declare officially the capital of Israel to be Jerusalem. And it did not just satisfy ourselves that declaration only, but as soon as possible, the parliament, firstly elected, to be moved on to Jerusalem. And that was done January 1949. Right by signing up ceasefire agreements with the neighboring countries, the cabinet, or the temporary cabinet, with the first Knesset elected, moved on to Jerusalem. But until that happening, Tel Aviv served obviously the center of actions of whatever kind. So Yafo vis-a-vis modern Tel Aviv. Aside Tel Aviv, since the 30s, 40s, very many bedroom communities were established. Again, on lands which were purchased by Jewish National Fund, and so came into existence throughout the British mandatory days. Places like Givatayim, Ramat Gan on the east side of Tel Aviv. It will be to the south, Bat Yam and Cholon, two very big cities nowadays. It will be Herzliya, again bearing the name of Herzl, on the north end of Tel Aviv, Ra'anana, Kfar Saba. Part of those villages, little townships, were busy in agricultural affairs, citrus orchards above all. Yet, quite obviously, within a rather short period of time, most of those orchards had disappeared in favor of housing projects. So most of them are proper cities nowadays, and altogether what we determine to be the metropolitan area of Tel Aviv, which takes grounds way down south to Rishon LeZion we're going to commute to, almost to Nes Ziona and Rehovot, the far end. It is joining a little colony which was established in the 70s of the past century by the name of Petach Tikva by several Jerusalemites to become a growing and a big city, adjoining the east end of the metropolitan area of Tel Aviv. Not of much open space is left now between the outskirts of Herzliya to the town of Netanya, and that we will see Friday commuting along the coast. So it became a whole vast area in the heart of Israel, which takes in today about 1 million in population. And 1 million, including the very small cult of Arabs here in Yafo, I will say it's almost 50% of the Jewish population of Israel, which in a sense is a very unhealthy situation. You have such a squeezed-in concentration of population in the heart of the country, and many other parts are still to be desired. On the other hand, quite obviously and naturally, this huge metropolitan area will serve, or had served 6 years back, the Scud missiles of our friend down there in Iraq, Hussein Saddam. Means, I'm saying, even they are not very appropriate on such a big target, you can't miss. And he did not miss. Means we had about 30 pieces of those Scuds falling upon us on the metropolitan area of Tel Aviv. All over the places, Ramat Gan somehow suffered the most. And damages of buildings, obviously, no longer one can see anything of those days back of the war, the gold prices. But there were quite a lot of damages caused in the greater area of Tel Aviv, and lucky enough we were not to have any losses of lives. I mean, 2 people died, but probably, aging one, probably of heart attacks, mean they got very scared, but not directly hit by the Scuds. Wounded in small numbers went down to the hospitals, what I'm saying in this regard. We were quite lucky altogether, but the damage was pretty severe. Yafo vis-a-vis Tel Aviv. Yeah.
Did you say that Herzliya is part of Tel Aviv?
No, it's an independent city, but like many others has become attached to, means it's one
The
huge
outskirts.
block, the block of Dan, which includes all those towns around Tel Aviv. And Tel Aviv itself, within its city boundaries, has today about 280,000 people. That's about all, which means the most actually of the population are living in a semicircle from the coast back to the coast around Tel Aviv in much greater numbers altogether. Cholon today, I think, is reaching something like nearly 200,000 people on its grounds. And it started like a tiny little bedroom community south of Tel Aviv, mostly for non-skilled people who were working in these small industries the Jews erected around Tel Aviv already in the British mandatory days. So all around Tel Aviv there are all type of industries, manufacturers, textiles, food and others. and all kind of businesses, as I said, as it serves really the heart of the country and the heart in this sense for international commerce and contact ever since. Okay, notice the church building beyond me, which is one out of quite a number of churches in Jaffa. Likewise in Jerusalem. Being an Arab town, the Christian denominations provided communal services throughout the 19th century to the locals, something the Ottoman authorities never bothered with. And by so doing, they drew quite a lot of the local Arabs to become Christian in faith. So obviously they put up schools and they put up several churches by the different denominations to provide services and a house of prayers. This very church has some remnants of Middle Ages, and it served in Middle Ages different purposes. Obviously there is a far back reason for Christianity in Yafo altogether. I'll refer to it pretty soon down in the small museum we are going to see right now. You have to remember this church and we'll come out and see it. It also has to do with a quick visit of Mr. Napoleon to this country in 1799. This sculpture made by an Israeli fellow called Daniel Capri is actually a tribute from Yafo to Tel Aviv in memory of Shalom Meir. Therefore it's facing like a gate, the Shalom Tower, and depicts through the eyes of the artist three very famous episodes. Jacob's dream at Bethel, north of Jerusalem, where he saw a ladder and angels going up and down heaven. And we have on the right hand side the story of Abraham taking Isaac to be sacrificed on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. And when he was ordered not to touch, a ram will serve as substitute to be sacrificed on that instant. And then when the children of Israel came into the land of Canaan, their promised land, when they go across the Jordan River, they will firstly clash with the Canaanites of the town of Jericho, depicted on the top, where the Jews surrounding the walls of Jericho for 7 days. On the seventh day, which was according to the book of Joshua the Sabbath, the walls of Jericho came tumbling down and the city was taken over. So three episodes of our biblical history depicted by Capri, the sculpture.
Got a pen?
Oh yeah,
A little something.
I'll let it drop down. Okay, after me please.
Got a paintbrush?
Yeah, come on. Zach, take a picture of us.
12 seconds. Oh, that might be nice.
Coming this way?
Which way? This way?
Details of this military invasion of Thutmose III, one of the basic and most important sources of information we have available to the land of Canaan, to many places which are mentioned in those hieroglyphs drawn on panels to mention specifically for the first time the name Israel. You have always names of places. You have obviously the land of Canaan as to determine this piece of land, in many instances under Egyptian control. It will be the late 13th century to mention Israel for the first time in one of the Egyptian documents. So this is one of the earliest events. Yafo is mentioned. Thereafter we have the mentioning of Yafo as a port upon which huge logs of trees, cypress trees from Lebanon, are being shipped along the coast, and from Yafo they will be delivered to the upbuild of the first temple in Jerusalem. The I mentioned, the first temple built by King Solomon was primarily made of huge cedar wood. More is the story. All kind of stories from the Greek Hellenistic period, and then we're coming into the 1st century Common Era, which had made Yaffo also important to a fellow Jew in Yaffo. And in his house he found a young student by the name of Agta, and he is seeing to actually revive her. She was about to die, and he managed to heal her just before she died. Then we have one of the governors of Yaffo, considered to be quite actually person, and the structure which still stands at the side of the road, the oldest road which Yaffo goes to Jerusalem. On the other side you will see drawings and pictures. Are associated with the port of Tel Aviv next door. Today, it just serves actually a marina, and people having their little private boats to sail out to the Mediterranean from the port of Tel Aviv. Yeah.
To the bus.
Miriam? This is what it was. Just like this here. It was all open. It's exactly the way it was.
Let's go, Gigi. Here we go. We got no water? No water. No water.
Nice picture.
No water. Can we ask a question?
Look at this door.
It's
To,
so
what
small,
did you say?
isn't it?
To Omar?
Omar Khayyam.
Entrance.
Isn't it small?
Yeah. Yeah, because it's barely the size of my hand.
Correct.
Galgal is a circle. So the circle is Galgal Mazalot, and those 12 emblems and names of the zodiac were drawn onto the streets and alleys of renovated Old Yaffo. Renovated because those, as I said, are homes which were abandoned primarily by Arabs who lived around here until March 1948. And in the early 50s, it drew the attention of artists to come back and start renovating and to create their own studios and galleries and residence in those type homes. So today, the section we just walked across, Old Jaffa is one of the centers of Israeli artists. About 30 to 40 years living and creating in here. The place usually becomes much more active and alive at night times. People coming to the restaurants and then could one
The nightclub that used to be, it's called Lama
was an Arab. I don't think. You will notice they will also have one or two boys escorting them with nets. Means all what is considered educational trips, which are affiliated, associated regulations drawn by the Ministry of Education and Powers, and then it appeals to the Jewish agencies, some of the campus schools all over. Yeah, and this is to follow an unfortunate event which occurred in exchange. And I'm saying, though Israel for years back had accepted a kind of a principle that we are not to negotiate with terrorists under whatever circumstances because they were kids. I think there was a 7th or the 8th grade kind of bat mitzvah boys and girls age group. The camp.
Here we are at a church, Jaffa in the afternoon. Some of the ladies, Gray,
to give us a feeling, an idea how those poor Jews who were rounded up by the British Navy were put into this camp. There were two other camps of the kind, the one near Jaffa and the one near Haifa. And the biggest of all was a camp in Cyprus. These people were boated back to Cyprus to be there detained. And all those who were still under or beyond barbed wire were suddenly released from those.
The background of the place, the period, and so on. So this camp was built in 1938 by the British in order to deal with the problem, by the British point of view, of the illegal immigration. And we are talking about this period of the illegal immigration. We are talking about a period at least 14 years. Between 34, 1 year after Hitler came to power in Germany, until 48 when Israel was established. We can also divide this period into three pieces. We can say before the war, during the war, and after the war. Before the war, we are talking mostly about young people who came from Germany, from youth movement, who felt that things are going to change because of Hitler. And they decided to leave everything and to come here to Eretz Israel. We are not talking yet about families because, as you know, for a family to pack and to live, it's much harder. And of course, no one predicted what's going to happen, as we know, the Holocaust. In Israel, the British are in power, and beside the British there is a majority of Arabs in a small Jewish settlement, we call it the Yishuv. When the Arabs see that there is coming a big migration of Jews, they became afraid that this situation, that their majority in Eretz Israel can be changed or no more exist. And they decided to make a lot of pressure on the British in order to limit the Aliyah, the immigration, the Jewish immigration, of course. Finally, the British couldn't stand the pressure and they decided to limit the Aliyah. It wasn't so easy. They published 3 books that we call them the White Books. And at first they said that could enter Eretz Israel only wealthy people in order not to harm the situation of the British. But then they announced an amount of people that could enter Eretz Israel each year. They will have certification, it's a permit enter. And above this number, it's around 12,000 a year, every Jew that wishes to come to Eretz Israel will be considered by the British point of view illegal. And you can understand that during the period of the Holocaust and after the Holocaust, mostly, there were much more than 12,000 people who wished to come here to Eretz Israel. So this is the first period, when the British caught boat coming from Europe at that period before the Holocaust, and they asked the people to show their certification. If the people had, so of course they could come in, but if they didn't, what happened most of the time, they were sent back to Europe. And you can understand that for those people who ran away from Europe, it's very hard to ask them to go back. And of course, those Jews were very stubborn. They couldn't just give up, so they waited that the British ship will go to Israel shore, and then they tried to sneak and come from another place. And it took the British a while to understand that actually all this time that they thought that those people are on their way back to Europe, and in Europe those people were already in Israel because they sneaked from another place. So when they figure out, they decided to build this camp in 1938, 1 year before the war started. And all those people that came illegally will be kept in this camp for a period of at least from 1 month until 2 years. And this camp operated for 10 years, but no one sat here for 10 years, because every year that the British announced of a new amount of people and they had a new certification, the people that stay here the longest time got those certification, and this was on the account they had to be sent to Europe, which means that if every year there were 12,000 certification, and in this time there were 2,000 people, they gave the 2,000 people certification, and then there were only 10,000 to send to Europe. So, as I said, it could last from 1 month until 2 years. The average time was a few months until 1 year. Sorry. The second period is the period during the Holocaust. At that period, there was a bit slowdown in the amount of people who came here to Eretz Israel due to 3 important reasons. The first one, it was very dangerous to sail at sea when the enemy is there. The second reason, there was a lack of boat because they used it for the war. And the third reason, maybe the most important one, is when Hitler decided of the final solution in 1941, it was almost impossible for Jews to leave occupied Europe. Because before the war, in the beginning of the war, the German organized ships in order to get rid of the Jew. But when Hitler decided of the final solution, we know that it was almost impossible. So of course, every time there are people that succeed to run away and to come here. And it's very important to remember that usually when we talk about the illegal immigration, we usually remember those people who came from Europe. But there were people that came by land from countries near us, like Egypt and Iraq, Syria, and so on. So because the war wasn't so bad there like it was in Europe, so those people always succeed to come here. The third period, and maybe the important one, is the period after the Holocaust, when all those people that survived the Holocaust left without any home to go back to, without any family sometimes, and of course other countries also didn't let them in. So they decided to do everything in order to come here to Eretz Israel. But unfortunately at that time, the British became more and more restricted, and if before the war and during the war we know about ships that succeed to sneak and to enter without the British knowledge, after the war we can count those ships in one hand, which means most of the people who came here after the Holocaust were caught by the British and kept in this camp. I want you for 1 minute to look around you, see the fences, see the watchtowers. There are 6 that surrounded the camp. You see here the barbs, and I can tell you that what we have today, it's only a very small part. We get inside the building, and you can see, and you will be able to see a picture. You can understand how big it was. But I can tell you that in very crowded time there were 5,000 people here in this camp. So, like those barbs, all this area north from us was full with barbs. Another important thing, that there was a complete separation between men and women from the day they entered the camp until the day they left. And if we are talking about families kept here, they had to be separated for such a long time. And actually, you can see this road, which was at that time with two fences that divide the two parts of the camp, the women part and the men part. This building that will be in a minute, this was the central building. When we get near to this building, you'll be able to see a chimney coming out of the building and a smoke came out of it. We'll talk in a minute what's the purpose of the place, but I want you to see when we'll get near to this building. Before we start the tour, I want to tell you a very famous story about a boat ship that's called Patria. I don't know if you heard the name, but there were 3 ships that came in 1940, the beginning of the war, from Germany. As I told you first, the German organized the beginning of the war ship with Jew in order to get rid of them. So those 3 boats came from Germany, and as you know, the British fought Germany also. And when they caught those ships and they knew that they came from Germany, they said maybe on those boats there are spies. So we'll take all those people from the 3 boats, we'll put them on a large one that was here in Haifa port, a French boat named Patria, and we'll send the people to a place called Mauritius. It's an island in Africa. It was the first time that they wanted to use this place in Africa. And the Jewish settlement, the Yishuv, knew that if those people will be sent to Mauritius in Africa, their chances to survive are very low because those people from Europe are not used to the climate, to the disease, and of course there was also a lack of food because it was a deserted island. Today it's a beautiful island for vacation, but at that time no one lived there. So they decided to do everything in order to prevent this sending away of the ship. With the Yishuv and the Haganah, that was like the small army of the Jewish settlement, decided to do is to put a bomb near the place of the agent. They thought that there will be an explosion, a small one. The agent will go out of control and the British will not have any choice but to release the people, in the worst case to bring them to this camp, but not to send them to Africa. But it was a big mistake and it was a big explosion, and 267 people died in that accident. And it made it very hard to deal with when the Yishuv itself made it by accident and not something that made by the Arab or the British. And remember this story because when we'll enter the place, I will tell you a story about a family, true story of course, that was on this ship when the explosion took place. Those days from the camp. And this is the first stop of the illegal immigrants when they enter the camp, and you may should understand why. The barracks outside were built only 7 years ago, but they are very similar to the barracks that were at that time, you'll be able to see. But let's start, before we talk about this building, I want us to go back and to think about the ship that's coming from Europe. The British caught the people, they asked them to show the certification, and they didn't have because they tried to sneak in illegally. When the British caught a ship that came illegally, usually they took the people down in Haifa port. As you know, Haifa is near Tikrit, but yet there is a ride, and they had to bring the people here. So the British used it for that 2 ways. The first one is by buses, and the second one is by trains. Very similar train to the train that the Nazis used during the Holocaust, which means that for those people who came here after the Holocaust, and they entered Eretz Israel and they had to be again on those trains, you can understand the association and you can understand the hard feeling that they had. And of course they didn't know where the British, where they were taken, how they will be treated, and of course they couldn't trust anyone. Then they came here, the train left them near the beach. The beach is very close to the camp. They walked a bit and they stood near the gate. And then they saw 3 fences. And you saw that between the fences there is a road. The British used it for watching the camp and patrolling. They saw the 3 fences, they saw the barracks, they saw the watchtowers, and they saw this building, like you saw it, and smoke came out of the building. And before they entered the building and they saw what you see, you saw they were separated from one another. Another thing that the Nazis used to do in the camps in Europe. And the hardest thing that when they stood in front of this building, they were told that in this building they are going to go through showers and disinfectant procedure. And of course, the first association they had, showers equal gas chambers. And people stood here and shouted and cried and screamed and said everything, but not this building. And the British stood here and couldn't understand what in this building made the people react such a way, because they really meant showers. Because those people, if we think about it logically, they came with all sort of disease because of the camps in Europe. It was very crowded in the ship because most of the time those ship carried much more people than the ship could carry, and it was very crowded. So for their sake and the sake of the people that already in the camp, it was very important to shower them and to disinfect them. But you can understand the association and the memories that the place brought back. And when the British start asking questions, because as you know, people came here before the Holocaust and the beginning of the Holocaust and didn't react such a way. They asked questions, and when they realized what's happened, they decided to do the showers that you can see both sides without any wall or any curtain that separated people that are taking shower now from the people that didn't enter yet and standing in this area. But most important, they could see the people that already left the showers and are getting dressed outside, which means in this place people are really going out and continue with their lives and not what they thought that no one is coming out from the building. And for some of them it was very important to see that. When the people went into the shower, they were disinfected with the material that's called DDT. I don't know if you heard the name, but today this chemical material is forbidden for use because today people think that it can cause very serious disease, but at that time, of course, they didn't know that, and they used that in all over the world, not only here in Eretz Israel. When the people went into the showers, also their clothes had to be disinfected, otherwise it's not helpful. And they were asked to bring their clothes when they entered the showers. Of course, you can understand that there were both sides because there was separation from the other side. So they wanted to come here undressed. And from here, people that already staying in the camp took their clothes and put it into the machine. This machine is working on steam. This is the reason that the smoke came out of the building. But this is not a laundry machine. It's only disinfected your clothes because of very strong heat that came out from the machine. It's a good laugh.
Oh, look at my phone, the bird. The bird went on the craft. A bird.
Lucky?
Yeah.
Oh,
Take a picture.
I think I got that
picture,
one.
zoom, and emphasize on the bottom. It was apropos.
Use the shower.
It was actually apropos to what she was just talking about.
I seen it on my car every day.
It's very dangerous.
I have to go back and
Where is that from?
It must be the
But
British.
here she's talking about the laundry. Ron, can you wash your shirt over him?
Oh, I think he's getting ready for another one here.
Okay, so you can understand that when they got their clothes out, they weren't clean, as we know today, that clothes coming from a laundry machine. And some of the clothes, because of the strong heat of the machine, get shrunk, which means not necessarily they could wear their clothes again. But as you know, clothes is something that you can replace, you can borrow from other people that already lived in the camp. And also they were getting clothes from the issue of the Jewish settlement outside. But people lost here a much more important thing than clothes. As you know, those people who came after the Holocaust, they didn't have any money or property or jewelry, but sometimes they succeed to keep a small photo of the family or a small memory that maybe for other people it meant nothing, but maybe for them it was the last memory from their family, from mother, father, that they will never see again. So when they came here, and you can understand that because of the hurry and the panic, people forgot things in their pocket. Sometimes the British were so restricted that they were afraid that there will be any chance that things will not be disinfected, and they forced them to put everything inside. And sometimes those pictures and small memories get lost or destroyed, but were sent to Cyprus came only when Israel was established. And until today in South Cyprus there are very similar camps to this one. So you can see how big it was. This picture was taken by the British at that time. That's the reason that you cannot see places that exist today, and Haifa, Tel Aviv, and so on. It was someone who came just lately, and he showed us the Haggadah of Pesach that they wrote by hand in all languages. They painted it, and it was very nice. And this is only a small example of how they try to keep this tradition. So let's start and show. Bar, the people wrote their names, sometimes the name of the ship, sometimes the name of the youth movement that they came with. This is original. Those pieces of wood, people that really cared for the place, they came here, they picked those things, and just 7 years ago when they decided to do it like a museum, they brought it back. And maybe when we finish I will tell you what happened to the camp until today and why there is nothing left from it. I want to tell you a story about someone that just came lately. Like, as I told you, that people are coming back today, and he said that when he came to the camp after the Holocaust, he was sure that no one from his family survived. And the day of his release came, he leaned under the bed in order to pack his thing, and then he found on the leg of the bed the name of his brother. He was very excited. He understood that his brother survived. He went outside, and as you know, the Jewish settlement was small, so it was quite easy to find people. Finally, he got to the place, he knocked on the door, and his sister opened, which means also his sister survived. And this is only one example of many that people are coming today and telling us that because of those names, they found their relatives. Okay, so as I told you, 70 people lived in such a room after the Holocaust. Of course, when it wasn't so crowded before the Holocaust and maybe during, there were only between 40 to 70, but still it's a lot. In this room, you will be able to see in a minute also an example of women and children room, but of course this is only for the museum, and during real time it was separated in another place. I want you to remember this suitcase because when we go outside I will tell you the story of the suitcase. On your left, in the end of the room, you will be able to see a small, I don't know how to call it. This place, they use it for a bathroom during the night. You can understand that 70 people that had to share one toilet, it's very hard, mostly because there was no free space between the bed. And it means that when you want to get to the door or to the toilet, you have to step on your friend's bed. Maybe you will think twice if you need to go to the toilet at night because you know that you'll have to wake your friends. tell you a story about a family that was on the boat when the explosion took place. And the suitcase is a part of the story. The story concerns a family that went out from Europe on one of the 3 ships that afterwards were on the Patria. And when they went out from Europe, the mother, Fortuna, was pregnant. At that time, when people went out from Europe, they didn't know how long it will take them to get to Eretz Israel, because it could last even months, because sometimes they had to pick other illegal immigrants from ports all over Europe. And of course, she didn't know if she will give birth to the baby on the boat or already in Eretz Israel. Finally, the baby was born on the boat, and of course, she couldn't, the family, couldn't organize well like today as small as a baby is born. And all the thing that they could do is to take their suitcase, to take everything out of it, to put a few blankets, and make it like an improvised bed for the baby. When the explosion took place, the baby Rachel was only 2 weeks old. You can understand that her chances to survive are very low, if at all, because she cannot run, she cannot protect herself. And when the British came immediately to the place after the explosion, they tried to save the people. When the explosion took place, there were only people from 2 ships, which means that the third one wasn't on the Patria, but here there were around 2,000 people, because in every small ship were 1,000 people, which means they wanted to send away 3,000 people. So you can understand that still there are a lot of people that survived. The British came, they took the people that survived on buses, they wanted to bring them to the camp. And the mother Fortuna was lucky she survived, and she begged the British to let her down from the bus to look for her husband and her baby. But they tried to explain that if everyone that survived will ask them to go down and to look for his relative, it will be very hard for them to save maybe people that can be saved. And they told her, come to the camp and then try to ask people, and we cannot help you. She came to the camp, she sat near the fences like other survivors waiting for buses to come. And after a few hours she recognized her husband, and she was very happy, but you can understand that her happy couldn't be complete until she didn't know what happened to her small child. This couple was going around the camp for a month and a half, trying to ask everyone that survived, people that came from the hospitals, and no one could help them, because you can understand that when the explosion took place, people were so panicked and just wanted to run, maybe to find their family, and it was almost impossible to ask them to remember of other people. After a month and a half, they almost gave up, they almost lose hope. And there was a very famous woman who came here from the Yishuv, named Henrietta Salt. I don't know if you heard her name, but she was very famous. During the Holocaust, she succeeded to save a lot of children from the Holocaust. And like other famous people from the Jewish settlement that were allowed to get in and to see what's going on with the people and to see if they could help them, she came, and she happened to hear the story of Fortuna and her husband, and she was very touching. And then she remembered that when she went to Rothschild Hospital in Haifa to visit the people that wanted in the explosion, the doctor took her to a special room, to a small room, and they showed her a baby. It was already 2 months old. The doctor said that she came in a very bad condition. It was very near that she will not survive. And they said that when the explosion took place, the British came immediately. They saw something on the water, and of course they didn't know what it was because all the crowd. The British soldier went to see, and he found in the suitcase the baby. Because of the explosion, the suitcase went from the boat, landed on the water. Because it's from wood, it flowed. And because the British soldier came so fast, he succeeded to save her, because if he would come a few minutes later, it was too late. Of course, they connected the child, Rachel, with her parents, and today this baby, Rachel, is a grandmother. She lives in Haifa, and she came to the camp to visit with her grandchildren very often. If she happens to visit, to meet other visitors, she is very happy to tell her miracle. And you can understand that this is only one story for many stories, because most of the people that came at that period and staying in the camp, every one of them has his miracle or their stories. Established in 48, this camp, of course, became a property of Israel. And during the 50s, when there was very large immigration from Iraq, Yemen, places near, Israel used it for immigration house camp for the new people who came, of course now legally, for a period of adjusting, and then they were sent to other places in Israel. During the Six-Day War, Israel kept here prisoner of war from Egypt. Afterward, the place was deserted. The Sukhnut, I'm sure you heard about the Sukhnut, she owned this place, and they decided to destroy everything. I don't know why. There was a big shout of people that were here at that time, illegal immigrants that already were citizens of Israel, and say how you can destroy such an important place, such a historical place, because one day will come and those people will not be alive anymore, and who will tell the story? So the Sukhnut stopped the destroying of the place, but they forgot to put someone to watch and to someone that will watch the place. And there were private people who came and just took everything that they could, windows, doors, wood, and so on. And only 7 years ago, Israel decided to make the place like a museum, so small children can come and learn about the place. We'll go in and we'll see a movie that actually summers most of the things that we already talked. I mean, Nazis camp was paradise. We cannot understand it today because we cannot understand how people that live in prison can say that it was paradise, but they had something to compare to. And the third reason that people say that although they were like in prison, they looked outside, they saw Eretz Israel from the fences, and they knew that although they will have to be here for a period that could last 1 month until 1 year, 2 years, but this is the last stop. From here they're going to build a new home in Eretz Israel where they wish to do that, and it gave them a lot of strength and hope for their new lives inside. So, sorry. This is a mikveh.
Because she was known for a very short time.
Yeah, it's a mikveh, but it was built only when the place was Israel property, and they used it for legal immigrants after the 50s. So it's not, it wasn't made by the British. Look for 1 minute at that picture. I don't know if you heard about a ship that called Max Nodo, but they came. Yeah? They came in May 46, and they just made in May a reunion here in this camp.
This lake was 50 years in but she lived for years.
left, he marks the campus of Haifa's University, which is at the very outskirts of the city, which spread from that tower leftwards all atop and the slopes of Mount Carmel. So I'm saying we are heading up this direction, and we are to visit and to be hosted in the Druze big village of Daliat el Carmel by one of the families there. Okay?
Jumpy over here? Really? See that? Look at it. Guess they used to be Americans here.
What happened to it? I'm with friends.
Well, she will tell us probably if it's 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 generations living together.
Daddy, we once went up somewhere in Mount Carmel, we invited our person for the humanity. And they keep adding a decoration for the house when the children
Children get married. It happens here too.
They were building back
Floor,
then.
extension.
Now, do they do this because it's for them personally, or do they do this as a source of income?
Not really a source of income because they've got good enough business without entertaining tourists. But there are families in various places across the country, Jews and Arab villages, which are willing to take in visitors to tell them a little bit.
But they're compensated, are they compensated?
Yeah, they are compensated. But I'm saying it's not their major business. It's more of an opportunity to open the house to visitors. And hopefully, at least 1 or 2 of them will be able to visit. Which is usually the case.
That's their oldest son that met you down there? Beautiful.
You're okay, kid.
Goes up to another dog.
You getting those gems good?
Oh, yeah.
The juice squeezer injury.
That was the funniest. Oh my Erica. Erica, why don't you tell the camera how you got injured this morning?
You got injured, Erica?
Severe.
What happened?
Is there any birds up there that have any idea?
Stay compliant.
Wait, what happened?
She caught her nose.
In
Oh, my God.
plunger?
No, yeah, she
Coming
put
bringing
it
it back.
Tamito.
We're gonna have a Zantac.
הקבוצה הזאת מניו יורק, חלק מהם כבר היה כמה פעמים בארץ, אבל אני חושב הם אף פעם לא נפגשו עם דרוזים, ובטח לא במסגרת משפחתית. אין בעיה ברצון. Plain water, grateful Jews, help yourself. It's self-service. מים חיים, that's right. מיץ, מים, אמנון, מה קורה איתך?
לא, זה בסדר, אני לא יכול לשתות עכשיו מיץ.
מים.
Yeah, good man.
Excellent.
And she's going to bring you
How's
also
that,
little
Bob?
cups with
No, this isn't baklava.
strong
that is.
black
ואל תשכח שזה הנכד שלי, יש לי 3 נכדים.
3.
Another
וכמה ילדים?
לי יש לי 3 נכדים.
Shalom.
She has 3 daughters and a son,
תראי אבא.
and those are 2 of her grannies already. זה נכד?
שני נכדים ונכדה.
2 boys, 2 grandsons and 1 granddaughter. ואתה בן?
לא.
אתה לא בן.
לא,
נסע עם הבת.
גיס. לא, הוא חתן של
חתן של אחת הבנות.
כן, הבן שלי זה שעלה איתכם.
כן, זה הוא אמר.
אחד רודני וזאת קטרין.
קטרין וזו הבת?
זו הבת. ושרה ועדנה.
שרה ועדנה.
כן.
לא כל כך עבריים, מה קרה?
כן.
וזה מאיה.
מאיה
אבל איך שרה ועדנה? מה פתאום אצל...
למה, איך קטרין ורודני?
לא, זה בסדר, אבל שרה ועדנה יותר מדי בעברית.
כן.
They're her grandchildren. Your son.
Three, the little one's a grand, and he is a son-in-law.
Cute.
אבל אתה יודע,
וכולם,
גם אצלנו
הבית, כל אחד עם הבית שלו. אבל כולם בכפר? כולם בדליה?
כל אחד
זה הבית שלו?
לא, אני
I got the camera right here.
השנייה, גם גם יש לה בית מפותח והיא נותנת קדימה לאישה. אתה קודם, האישה קודם והוא אחרי זה. הוא אומר שקודם כל האישה. אז יש לי אחות בסטודיו.
הרבה יותר מסורתיות.
לא מסורתיות, אבל אני חושבת שעכשיו הם...
Sisters are more traditional and more conservative, and the change of hair is primarily due to her husband,
Hey!
who has given her the mission, open mind, push to study and become more modern.
Well, yeah.
She said most of her sisters did study, and yet they are dressed much more traditional. And with the can be next doors, but not the kind of the same circle. Means the women will always keep a little bit aside. So she is definitely an exception.
You can feel it.
No,
Something American.
it's all male. The religion is all male. That's from one generation to the other, male-wise only.
Similar to a bar mitzvah, where they have a certain age, like 13, where they
No,
have
they
their
don't
right
have
to
such a
vote.
thing.
They don't
Nikki, very inquisitive.
Maturity. Nothing of the kind.
Good question, though, Nick. It was on my mind.
Okay, folks, I say we roll on the road again.
Shopping.
Yeah,
they will be more
definitely.
they wouldn't
No.
they're not going to suffer for the